afternoon, everybody. I'm calling, we're reaching you once again on the last session of our webinar series organized by the Nigerian chapter of Society for Conservation Biology in collaboration with Safe Saharan Network, which is a non-governmental organization here in Nigeria. I'm glad to welcome you all once again to this webinar, which we started about 2 weeks ago. This is the third week and the last section of the webinar of which we're going to have today. It has been interesting all the while, and we are glad with the feedback we have been receiving. So today we have the presenter, somebody who's going to present for us in person of Dr. Lynne Baker, that is presenting on how can we choose donor, how can we select donor, and how can we prevent falling prey of predatory donor. So quickly, let me introduce Dr. Baker to you before she made a presentation. Dr. Lynne Baker is a senior research associate with the Rome-based Institute of Development, Ecology, Conservation, and Cooperation. Formerly, she was a faculty member at the American University of Nigeria in Yola in Adamawa State, located in northern part of Nigeria. Dr. Baker first came to Nigeria in 1996 and has since then been conducting conservation research and working with local communities in Nigeria. Our research focuses on human dimension of conservation and human-wildlife interaction. Dr. Baker is considered a leading authority in the endangered Scletus monkey, a species endemic to southeastern Nigeria. And she founded Hippo Network Nigeria, which is a network of individuals and organizations working towards conservation of hippo in Nigeria. Now, Dr. Baker has previously conducted training for Nigerians, faculty, and students on assessing journals quality and predatory publishing. This is an excellent and erudite scholar that will be presenting for us today. I have on standby Professor Max Schwartz that presented last week, and Dr. Tuyeni that presented the upper week. So I welcome you all over the country and all over the world for joining us today. So Dr. Baker, the floor is for you. Thank you so much, and I welcome you on board.
Okay, Dr. Fuller, thank you so much for that great introduction. I'm very happy to be here. I just wanted to remind everybody who's coming in to turn off their videos and to mute themselves, so that will help us with the bandwidth and everything. So, so today is part 3, as Dr. Fuller said, in our webinar series for the Nigerian Society for Conservation Biology. And there we go. And this was the flyer that was sent around, and we started 2 weeks ago with an excellent presentation from Dr. Tuyeni, who focused on preparing a scholarly article and the important considerations in doing that. And she stressed the idea that getting cited is very important versus thinking just simply about getting published. And she presented on the OCAR approach, which is opening, challenge, action, and resolution. So that presentation was made available on video if you'd like to watch that again, and also the slides are available there as well. I think Dr. Fuller has already sent those around. And that was followed last week by a great presentation from Professor Mark Schwartz, who is the editor-in-chief for Society of Conservation Biology's newest journal, which is Conservation Science and Practice. And he dealt with all those ethical issues. the order of authors, who is an author, plagiarism, conflicts of interest, copyright issues. And so that was a very in-depth presentation that covered all those important areas. And so we're going to round up today talking about, once you've prepared your article, you've written it, you've got the order of authors, you've decided all those things, where are you going to submit that article? And I want to just point out that normally, in many cases, you might actually be thinking ahead of time about which journal will be appropriate for a particular paper that you're writing based on research. So it might not be something that you do at the very end. In many cases, you'll be thinking ahead of time, hey, this story would be very good in this journal. And so you'll have that in mind even when you're writing. But that we'll get to that. But so in summary, I just wanted to also thank not only Professor Tueni and Professor Mark, but also our moderator. Dr. Fola has been doing amazing work in getting the information out, connecting all of you to this webinar series, and providing all the updates in the data. So I want to give him a round of applause and thank you for our speakers and our moderator. And so that's a big Nigerian thumbs up to this webinar series team. Good job, and let's get moving now on journal selection.
Thank you
so
much.
As researchers, we are all about disseminating our findings to a bigger audience. And that's the whole goal, that's the idea of producing scholarly work. So for most academics, our goal is to publish in high quality peer-reviewed journals. And that is also a means to getting promoted, for example. So that's the goal of most academics. So when we're submitting our manuscripts, one of the key steps is to decide the most appropriate journal for our work. And we have to decide that based on a variety of factors: the scope, or the aims of the journal, the reputation of the journal, how it does peer review, the quality of peer review, and journal metrics. And journal metrics are simply, a ranking system, essentially, or ways to rank and assess journals. I'm going to turn off this. Hold on a second. I need to. There we go. Okay, so there's a variety of things, and we'll talk about these different things today. So one of the topics we want to think about before we move on is the concern or the phenomenon of predatory publishing. And the term predatory publishing came about 10, 12 years ago, and it was originally introduced, I believe, by Dr. Jeffrey Beal, who is with the University of Colorado in the United States, who used the term predatory to basically describe the kind of aggressive nature of these publishers as they try to get you to submit your manuscripts to their journals, and kind of the practices that they had. So we're going to use sharks as our predator theme through this presentation. And unlike predatory publishers, many sharks are endangered. We'll talk about that as we move ahead. So what is predatory publishing? Well, predatory publishers are essentially 419 operations. They are publishers that are using deceptive tactics. They're publishing unscholarly journals, and they're exploiting the open access model, which is basically where you as an author pay to publish your work in that journal, and the journal, then that article is made freely available to the public. Okay, they can actually be one-person operations involved in this, running the show, which is very odd, and they're oriented toward the author. So they're really trying to sell you, hey, you should, submit your manuscript to my journal, and it's less about the reader and more about the author. So last year in December, an article was published in Nature that was, the goal of this was, I think there were 40 some researchers involved from 10 countries, and they wanted to come up with a definition, because there's never been sort of a clear definition of predatory publishing or predatory journals. And so they wanted to come up with something that everybody could agree on. And so they published this in December of last year, And they determined that a predatory publisher is one that prioritizes self-interest, usually financial, at the expense of scholarship. And they're characterized by false or misleading information, deviation from best editorial and publication practices, lack of transparency, and the use of indiscriminate or aggressive solicitation practices, which is really why they got that word predatory. So this is the definition they put forward, and this is probably a good way of thinking about this is, what is a predatory publisher? How do they operate? And we're going to talk more about that as we move ahead here. So one of the things that, and this topic has been researched quite a bit recently in the last few years. You can find several scholarly articles published about predatory journals and popular articles published. So there's a lot of things available on the internet that you can find. And some of the data we have that has been published has shown that these publishers are plenty and increasing. So they're being used, predatory journals are being used by thousands of researchers, particularly in developing countries, mostly out of Asia and Africa, but also in other locations in the West, Canada, the United States, the UK, and Australia. An article published about 5 years ago in BMC Medicine took a look at the sort of growth of this phenomenon of predatory journals and publishers from 2010 to 2014. And they used something called Beall's List. And Beall's List was started, I believe, in 2008 by Jeffrey Beall, who I've mentioned. And he had several criteria that he developed, and he was a librarian. The number of journals per publisher. So there are some journals, some publishers that just publish a single journal, okay? But most of them publish several journals. And so this particular study just made a distinction between, publishers by the number of journals. But all you need to do is look at that overall growth, and you can see the increase in that 4-year period. They also found out that the distribution of both the publisher and the authors using these predatory journals was highly skewed toward Asia and Africa. So the origin of the publishers from this study, primarily they found were from India, 27%. And other parts of Asia, North America, nearly 18%. And then the impossible to determine category is almost 27%. And that's basically that the publishers advertised multiple addresses in different countries. So they couldn't really tell where the origin of that particular publisher was. But you can see that this is a global sort of issue. Not really, it focused in a few areas, but it is global. They also sampled 262 authors specifically and looked at where they were from. And they found that nearly 77% of those authors came from Asia or Africa, 35% roughly from India, 8% from Africa, and 6% from the US. So again, this is a global issue, but you can see that Africa and Asia contributed over 3/4 of the authors using predatory journals, according to this study. And then another very interesting statistic that was put forward in this paper was the ratio of articles published in predatory journals to, so the ratio of how many articles are published using predatory journals over those that are considered to be published in good journals, that were those that were indexed in something called Web of Science. So it was just from 2013 to 2014, and they wanted to look at the ratio at a percentage. So how many in predatory journals compared to what would be considered reputable journals. And this is what they found. Pretty shocking, actually, to look at Nigeria. So a really tremendous number of articles published in predatory journals relative to what would be classified as reputable journals for this particular study during that time period. It was also a serious problem in India and Iran. So that is something that, you know, as the Nigerian Society for Chapter of Conservation, Society of Conservation Biology, Nigeria chapter, we kind of wanted to address this issue because it seems to be an issue that is very much a problem here in Nigeria. So another paper published just a couple of months ago in The Economist took a look at the growth of predatory journals compared to those considered trustworthy or reliable. And you can see here that the sort of gray area here, grayish brown, are those considered reliable journals. And you can see the number of journals that have been added from 1960 to 2018. And then here is the growth in predatory journals in that reddish orangish color. So basically, as of 2018, there's roughly 13,000 predatory journals, and it's growing. And so since 2014, we had what, roughly 8,000 predatory journals, now 13,000, according to this, this data. And this is data from Cabell's, which is a firm that sort of keeps track of reputable and disreputable publishers and journals. So the data came from Cabell's, and there's the website there, I've listed it. And it was published in The Economist. So this, by the way, this scale over here is in the thousands. So 5 means 5,000, 30, 30,000. And you can see that there's been a growth of predatory journals in all of these different sort of subject areas, biology quite a bit, a lot more in math, physical and chemical sciences, and quite a bit in health as well. Now this graph was published in The Economist, and I apologize, it's confusing. It looks a little confusing. But what they wanted to do, and what I want to point out is the little data they showed us about Nigeria here in the bottom left-hand corner. And you can see that those red kind of orange colored dots, 1 dot equals 20 journals is what they've listed here. And you can see that for Europe, North America, China, this phenomena sort of took off in 2008, 2010. All of these predatory journals were added toward that period in the last 10 to 12 years. So it's a recent sort of phenomena. And in Nigeria, what they found is that very few reliable, or what they would consider trustworthy journals, were added in Nigeria, but more than 1,000 predatory journals. In India, they found that 300 trustworthy journals were added, but more than 4,000 predatory journals. So again, this is data from Cabell's, and this article is in The Economist. I have copies of a lot of these papers, and I can share them on the chat later. I can send them to everybody. So again, just to illustrate, this is one of the reasons we want to talk about this for Nigerian scholars. I want to make sure you understand too, this is not a Nigeria problem or an India problem at all. This is a problem globally. And this was an article published in 2017 in Nature. And what they found is that in a sample of nearly 2,000 papers, in more than 200 supposed predatory journals, while most of those articles came from India, more than half of the papers had authors that were based in higher income or upper middle income countries, like the United States and Japan. So it's definitely not something that is exclusive to Asia and Africa, and certainly not to Nigeria, but we definitely want to address it here in Nigeria. But it is a global problem, a global issue. And so that's why there's been so much talk and publications about predatory publishing in academia and research. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the issue here? Why is it such a big problem? What's the major concern with predatory publishers? You know, predatory publisher pursuing me for my manuscript. What is the big problem? Well, for one thing, experts agree that it corrupts the idea of open access. It gives it a bad name. It has increased the incidence of research misconduct, such as plagiarism. And it promotes bogus or 419 research. One of the concerns that has been raised is that when you have poor research that is making it into journals, and those journals that research might be used by societal institutions that actually rely on good science to make policy decisions. Suddenly they're making decisions based on this sort of poor research that's being published in predatory publications. Another concern is that pharmaceutical and biomedical entrepreneurs are publishing results, say, of drug studies in these predatory journals and saying maybe that their drug is valid or their drug is past all COVID-19 as well. So it's young or less experienced scholars can be easily deceived by the misleading journal metrics and very exciting titles that sort of draw you in, and the promise of fast acceptance and publishing times. I should point out that some authors are complicit, so they actually know what they're doing here and they are okay with that. They want the fast publishing times, the easy process. They don't want to go through any kind of rigorous peer review. They have just stacked their resume with all of these articles in predatory journals that may help them earn promotion. And so ultimately, the role of merit, of good work in academic advancement is being degraded through this, the use of these journals. It can actually come back to bite you. There has been a lot of discussion about what happened at the University of Pristina in Kosovo, where some faculty and the rector were determined to have used predatory journals that helped them become promoted. And this later was pointed out, and they were actually, I guess, called on to resign. And so one of the things to think about is, it might be that maybe your supervisor, your colleagues are not aware of the issue, but they could be in the future. And so it's very important to be very aware of journal quality and journal reputation, because it'll affect your own reputation and it can come back later and cause problems for you. Another issue has to do with digital preservation. Often these predatory publishers do not back up their content. They might have missing back issues that there's no way to access. Another concern that scientists have raised is that these predatory publishers allow for junk science or pseudoscience. A lot of pseudoscience is being published that would have never been published before the advent of these predatory journals. And this science is then getting indexed in academic indices such as Google Scholar and others. These articles here were shown to be very suspicious. This was originally work that was done by Jeffrey Beal, and he found that these predatory publishers, sort of because of the lack of peer review and the lack of careful review, they publish a variety of things that end up being sort of just junk science. And so you have to be very aware of that if this material is being cited or used by other scientists, if it's not being carefully reviewed. And okay, so how do these publishers actually work? How do they operate? It's really important to understand that so that you can be careful and make sure that you article processing charge, and that charge then means that your article will be published and made freely available to the public on the web. You can access any fully open access journal. You can get in and read everything, and you pay an APC for that. The issue with some of this predatory publishers is that there's a conflict of interest, because the more papers that are accepted, the more income that's being made. And I need to point out that not all open access journals are bad. There are quite a few very reputable open access journals. And I know there's some debates about open access and traditional models, but even there's several conservation science and practice, conservation letters, several, the PLOS journals, those are journals that are open access, and that they are high quality journals. So make sure I wanted to point that out. Of course, not all traditional journals are considered good either. So you have to be aware of that. So I'm going to go through a whole list of things that scholars have determined and experts have determined are features of predatory journals, are common characteristics. And I want to point out that not all predatory journals will have all of these features or all of these characteristics. They might only sort of have 2 or 3, and others might have 10 or 15. So these are just features that will help you as scholars assess a journal and determine whether that journal is possibly disreputable or predatory. One of the things we know is that they like to send lots of emails to many, many, many researchers, and some of them say, you know, they're sending you emails for journals that are outside of your field, you know, asking you to submit. Those are the kinds of things to be aware of. Spelling errors, grammatical errors, an appearance that appears unprofessional is another red flag. If a title is very ambiguous or overly broad, that's a warning sign. The physical location is not clear, or it absolutely is wrong, that's obviously a warning sign. Some journals they'll have no affiliation with a reputable university, a reputable society or association, or a reputable publishing company. Not all journals have to have an affiliation. Good journals have to have an affiliation, but many do. For example, the Society of Conservation Biology publishes several journals, and so you have a reputable society and you know those journals are trusted. Oftentimes, editorial board membership may be incorrect, or it may be made up, or they list people without their knowledge. That's actually happened to me before. It may have happened to some of you, where you find your name on an editorial board and you didn't know that you were ever on that board. They have an interest in receiving money up front, like from the beginning, and that's not typical. Or they're willing to negotiate with you on that article processing charge. Okay, you don't want to pay this amount, well, we'll give you a discount for this amount. That's very unusual and a warning sign. Another problem, and this is probably one of the key, if not the major issue, is the peer review. It is either non-existent or very poor. So your article's not being properly reviewed by your peers, and this is a big concern. Many times predatory journals will not apply any editing. They'll just accept your paper as is. And you know that if you published in reputable journals, you'll know that is extremely unlikely. And so it's a warning sign. If you take a look at that journal and you see a large number of other sort of low quality or maybe bogus looking research, that's a warning sign. Something about hijacking established journals, and I'll give you an example later, but this is where a predatory publisher will basically make its journal, look very similar to a reputable journal. And so you can be easily deceived, you may be confused, and I will give you an example of that. The journals are not indexed in scholarly databases that we recognize. They often advertise non-standard or sort of fake metrics, things like impact factors that are not considered standard in academic publishing. And I'll give you some examples of that as well. So an article that was published in BMC Medicine in 2017 by Shamsier and colleagues listed several other things, and this is from their table 10. And I just thought I'd put that here. Again, some of the things that I've already mentioned. Website or the emails contain spelling or grammatical errors. They appear unprofessional. Images look distorted. The home page, again, it's author oriented. They're targeting authors and not readers. One of the sort of impact factors that has been that experts say is not valid, that the Shamsier and colleagues had a problem with, was index Copernicus value. So if they advertise that, that would be maybe a warning sign. They ask you to submit your manuscript through email, highly unusual. They promise rapid publication. If you know anything about using reputable journals, the peer review process, the production process, all of this takes time. And so it may take months and months, and you might be very frustrated by that, but that ensures high quality. So when they promise you, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks publication time from submission, that's a warning sign. No retraction policy, a warning sign. No information about digital preservation, as I already mentioned. Also, the article processing publication charge is often very low, maybe $150 US, $200 US, $300-400. Those are actually quite low compared to reputable open access journals, which are often, a couple thousand US dollars. And so that is a bit of a warning sign. And they also, the contact information might be a non-professional email address like Gmail or Yahoo. Again, that would be unusual. Okay, so these last 3 slides just listed several features that have been identified as characteristics that are often found with predatory publishers. And again, not every publisher or journal will have every single one of these, characteristics. They might have 3 or 4 or 10 or 15. But the idea is this will help you in terms of your assessment of journals by using this as a guideline. So let's do some examples here. These are actual emails that were sent from what were considered to be predatory publishers. And this is from Global Advanced Research Journal of Agricultural Science. And if you're a scientist working on agricultural issues, this sounds pretty exciting. Global Advanced Research Journal. Your supervisor may find that to sound really great and be excited for you. But if we take a look at this email that was sent, take a look at that area toward the bottom. They list there 5 different email addresses, 2 of which are Gmail addresses. So immediately you're like, what's going on here? And that would be a warning sign that, hey, maybe this is not something I want to get involved with here. That's one way to look at it. They also, predatory publishers tend to try to capture every possible topic and discipline in order to attract authors. And so they will simply come up with lists of names of journals that are repetitive. And for, Horizon journals, and by the way, these are sort of, I cropped out the bottom, there's even more, the lists go down, but these are from emails and websites. And you can see that the Horizon Journal of Medicine, the Horizon Journal of Agriculture, the Horizon Journal, so it's just repeated. And when you see that, that is a warning sign that this is simply a predatory publisher looking to try to cover every possible discipline to get you to submit your article. So that's something to be aware of. And again, we talked about titles that are overly broad. So this is the International Journal of Business, Humanities, and Technology. And if you look at the aims and scope, you can see that they publish in very disparate areas. So this journal will publish things in business law, gender studies, statistics and econometrics, political science, social welfare. These are very different disciplines, right? Very, very diverse. This is a warning sign that basically they're trying to attract authors, and they say, look, we'll publish it in almost every possible area in a single journal. And that's very unusual. And so you should be wary of that. Again, we talked about checking the websites for key information. This is the top half of a website. I couldn't include the whole first page of the website, but it looks very professional. The American Research Institute for Policy Development. It looks like a very professional, public, very reputable. But if you look carefully and you sort of dig around, you might find something that's not so clear. One of the things was the address. So we looked up the address to see where this was. the American Research Institute for Policy Development. I remember a few years ago it was listed in Washington, D.C., and now it's listed in Madison, Wisconsin in the United States. And if you Google that address, it's in the middle of a road in a residential area, in a neighborhood of homes. And so that would be a warning sign about this particular publisher, that the address is clearly wrong. Okay. Here's an example of a hijacked journal. I mentioned that earlier, right? This is where a publisher publishes a journal and makes it look very, very similar to a reputable journal. So you have two, the Yokel Journal and then the Yokel Journal of Earth Sciences. The Yokel Journal of Earth Sciences is published by the Iceland Glaciological Society and Geoscience Society of Iceland. So we know that that's a reputable society. So that will help us think, well, that's probably the authentic journal, and it is. And the one on the Yokel Journal, which looks very similar, is the Hijacked Journal. It's made to look very similar to another journal. As an author, as a scholar, you might submit to the wrong one because you're confused, or it's just so similar. And if you actually do that and there's no clear retraction policy and you realize, oh my gosh, I submitted to the wrong journal, then you have to sort of go to them and ask to retract, and that can be very complicated. And I've heard stories where journals refuse and they publish that work and expect payment, and you never intended it to really be in that journal. So you want to be very careful with this as well. Another thing is to look at other papers that have been published in a journal and find out, whether things don't look, look suspicious, or those articles don't look like they're very good articles. Do you want to be associated with that journal? So in one case, I found an article about the Stubbs Creek Forest Reserve in Akwa Ibom State in the southeast of Nigeria. And many of us with the Society of Conservation Biology were familiar with the fauna and flora of Nigeria. And so if you kind of look through this and you look at the abstract, you will see that the authors had listed previous species that were found to occur in Stubbs Creek Reserve 20 to 35 years ago. And they listed giraffe, they listed elephants, hyenas, kangaroo, leopards, lions, and tigers. So as a scientist or as a scholar, you might say, hey, in a swamp forest habitat, we would never have had giraffe. We don't have hyenas there in that habitat. Kangaroos don't occur on the continent of Africa. So you would be like, hey, maybe this journal doesn't even do peer review, because a good peer review would have said, hey, this is a reason for concern that these species were listed in this particular site. So peer review is really important, again, in sort of making sure that good quality articles are being published. And many predatory journals have poor or non-existent peer review. And I want to mention a very recent article that was published in a predatory journal. So an author named Daniel Bardossery, if I'm saying that correctly, is a scientist. He's decided that he was very tired of getting emails from predatory publishers. He was very, very tired of that. So he created essentially a bogus, a fake article called "What's the Deal with Birds?" And the whole point of the article was to show that it could be published in a predatory journal because of the lack of peer review, the lack of any vetting process. And so he did get it published in a journal called Scientific Journal of Research and Reviews. Now, this particular journal has since taken down this article. I think they became aware. And you can see here, let's just look at the abstract, because that will tell you that this didn't go through peer review or good peer review. The abstract says, many people wonder, what's the deal with birds? This is a common query. Birds are pretty weird. I mean, they have feathers. What the F? Most other animals don't have feathers. To investigate this issue, I looked at some birds. I looked at a woodpecker, a parrot, and a penguin. They were all pretty weird. In conclusion, we may never know the deal with birds, but further study is warranted. So this was actually an accepted paper published for real in a journal. And so again, the point of doing this was to show that the lack of review, the lack of peer review and checks is one of the most serious problems with predatory publishing. So also, I should say that the author said that the journal demanded $1,700 as a publication fee, and they were willing to negotiate, and they negotiated it down to nothing, and they thought that he would then publish again in their journal because they were accommodating him. But anyway, you can see those articles. Those articles are online if you wish to look at them. The Audubon article about this is online. Okay. Another issue with predatory publishers is the use of fake, or what I said, non-standard impact factors and other journal metrics, which are ways of sort of categorizing and ranking journals. And so according to predatoryjournals.com, these are some of the bogus impact factors that are often used by predatory publishers. And it looks exciting, and if we don't know better, we might think, hey, this looks like a very valid journal. It has an impact factor, you know, from international scientific indexing, and you know, so we can be deceived by this. So let's talk about those metrics that are considered trusted. And one of those is you need a subscription for, but it's Journal Citation Reports, which is uses data from Web of Science. It's published by Clavariate Analytics. It used to be published by Thomson Reuters. So sometimes you'll see that Thomson Reuters name come up with Journal Citation Reports. That's okay. It is the same thing. It just has a new publisher, Clavariate Analytics. And they have several metrics that they publish that are associated with journals. One is the journal impact factor, which is what we often hear about. A 5-year journal impact factor, an eigenfactor, an immediacy index. We don't have time to discuss what all these mean, or you know, the debates about these, but the point is that if a journal is listed in Journal Citation Reports and has a Clavariate journal impact factor, it's probably not a predatory journal. So now this is a subscription-based service, and many university libraries, you know, in Nigeria, I know they may not have that, but don't fear, don't fret. You can get some free metrics as well that you don't have to have a subscription for. And 2 of those are Google Scholar, and another 3 of them use data from Scopus. So these are other metrics. SiteScore, SJR, and SNP are different metrics that help rank journals using Scopus data, and those are all freely available. Now, I should point out that SiteScore is considered a trusted metric, but you will find that predatory publishers might confuse you by using something called Site Factor. So you will see Site Factor, and in fact, that is not considered to be trusted. So you want to be careful. Some predatory publishers can be very savvy in confusing you. So let's take a look here. This journal is Global Environmental Change. This is a trusted journal, a reputable journal. And you can see that in the bottom. This is the front page of the website for the journal, and you can see where they list those journal metrics, those sort of rankings, in the bottom there on the left. And you think, okay, so these are the things that were just mentioned as trusted metrics. And so I can see that they list a site score. And again, what that number means, you can read more about that. Each of these are different. Then it lists impact factor. Well, what impact factor is that? Is it the Cosmos impact factor that is, you know, not considered trusted? Is it ISI impact factor, or Copernicus index? So you see there's a little little symbol, little I, next to impact factor. And if you click on that little I, it'll explain to you what actually where that impact factor comes from. And you can see that it comes from Journal Citation Reports, Clavariate Analytics. So you know that's the trusted source for journal impact factor, and that it's not another type of impact factor. So you can do your own kind of investigation to help you be sure that you're not looking at a predatory journal by using these tools. You also hear a lot about indexing and abstracting, and again, we can't get into a lot of details because it's we don't have time for that. But basically, an index is a database of journals. It's organized by discipline, subject, and type of publication. Journals that are included in a reputable index are considered higher quality. Basically, they're vetted. They have to go through a process to be included. I should say that some predatory journals are very clever and have figured out how to be indexed in a few of these academic indices. But in general, they might be only in one and not in all the major ones. And so some of the major examples we know of are Academic Search, CAB Abstracts, Medline PubMed, Google Scholar, Science Citation Index. And I'll show you, 1 second, I'll show you, let me see here. Okay. If you go to the website for the Society for Conservation Biology and look at the different journals there, and you want to look at, let's say, conservation biology, and you want to go to the overview, if you scroll down, again, the aims and scope are there, all the information, and then information about indexing and abstracting are found here. So you can take a look at those different indexes that are used for reputable journals. And then I know that also the same thing for conservation letters published by the Society for Conservation Biology. You can go to the overview and see where they are indexed in which sources. So there we go. So, and again, sometimes predatory publishers will mention indexed in Google or indexed in ResearchGate, and that is not accurate. Google Scholar, okay, but not just Google. It's not a database as such. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these emails that have been received, and how can you as an author, as a scholar, sort of help yourself by determining whether this is valid or not, whether this is a trusted journal? Well, again, take a look at those things we talked about. In one case, internationally listed, internationally is misspelled. Okay, so that would be a warning, a little bit of a warning there. Thomson Reuters Researcher ID indexing. Not something, just, it looks like we don't know what that is. That's not something that is a common index or a known index at all. And they talk about high impact factor, JCC. So again, journal citation reports is the major source for these impact factors, so JCR, JCC, I mean, it's easy to confuse somebody. They mention Copernicus value here, and again, some authors have claimed that this is a non-trusted or a non-standard impact factor. If you look at the bottom, it talks about submission deadline and notification. So if you submit your paper by the 27th of April, you will be notified within 5 days whether it is accepted, and it will be printed June 30th. This is very fast and is very atypical, and that would be a warning sign. Let's take a look at another option. This is the International Journal of Innovative Technology and Research. Again, they advertise impact factor. We don't know what impact factor that even is. We know it's, if you look this up, it's not going to probably be in journal citation reports, so we don't know what that is. That would be a concern. And take a look down at the bottom of this email. They said that the deadline for submitting your manuscript was the 15th of March. The publication would come out on the 30th of March. That's 2 weeks. And so we all know that that is extremely unusual and is a big warning sign that this is likely a predatory journal, because it doesn't happen that way. If you go through peer review and production, it's simply not going to happen like that. Also, there was a time when I received emails from 3 different publishers, but they all looked very similar. So this was kind of a red flag. One was called Savant Journals. And if you look at Savant Journals, they would say it was published by Savant Publishing House, language English, publication fee $200, type open access. And it listed an impact factor. Now again, impact factors are associated with a journal, not a publisher. So that would be kind of an immediate warning sign. It's not telling you an impact factor for a particular journal. It's just listed there for the publisher. And then I received 2 other emails from Swift Journals and Donish Journals, and they looked very similar to Savant Journals. And they had very similar information. They listed an impact factor, not associated with the journal, language, English, publication fee, 200, type, open access. So I was thinking maybe these are all the same people, you know, having multiple publishers, multiple journals. And so that's something to be aware of, and that would be a warning sign. So what's going on? Well, in India, they've decided that, you know, this is an issue that is worth addressing at the highest levels. And so they did a couple of things. One is they began to create a reference list of respectable titles. So these are trusted journals. So now you know, as a researcher, a scholar in India, you have a list of what's considered respectable or trusted journals. That's very helpful. And they also did something else. The University Grants Commission in India, which actually provides money to higher education and oversees higher education, removed more than 4,000 journals from their approved list. So they went through and basically purged over 4,000 journals they consider to be predatory, which means that scholars in India cannot get funding and would not be able to get promotion if they were using those, what they consider to be dubious or predatory journals. So there are things that we can do that, you know, that societies and countries can kind of do to address the issue. And this is going on in India. In addition, some journals are creating their own policies about predatory publishing. One of those is the Journal of Threatened Taxa, which is based in India. And the Journal of Threatened Taxa has actually come up with a policy saying we will not accept articles that are submitted that cite, you know, these predatory journals. So if you submit a paper and your paper cites several other predatory journals, it would not be accepted in this. Okay, so these are the kinds of things that are being done to address this. So let's say we're a scholar and we don't want to endanger our reputation. We want to make sure we're using respectable journals. How can we avoid predatory publishers? Well, again, those few things that I listed, those slides I listed were with the features of predatory publishers. Go back and use that as a checklist or a guideline. Ask yourself questions related to those things. Did I receive an email solicitation with spelling errors or that offered fast publication? Did the journal advertise metrics that were not considered standard? Did the journal ask me to submit my manuscript by email? Are the costs associated with publishing clear? Again, credible journals will not ask you for submission fees. Do the details for the journal and its staff appear valid? You know, ask yourself those questions, use those features, and you will all be able to get access to this PowerPoint, so you can kind of use that as a guideline. And again, there are lots of other resources out there on the internet to help you. You can verify the claims about indexing, ask if it's indexed, but don't just accept the journal's claims. You can verify those claims by looking through databases. Do you recognize the index that's being listed by that journal? You can also check the directory of open access. And if a journal is listed there, it's probably a trusted journal. However, it has been found that predatory publishers are getting to be very savvy, and several predatory journals may be listed now in the directory of open access. So just be aware, if you check the DOAJ, you might want to also look for other you know, aspects to be sure that it is not a predatory journal. You can also check for best practices from that journal. Ask if the publisher is a member of recognized professional organizations that commit to best practices. One of the major ones is the Committee on Publication Ethics, COPE. Another one would be the Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association. Are they a member? And I stress member because some predatory journals have used the language that you find in reputable journals, and it can be confusing. And so this is the website of what was considered a predatory publisher. And you will see under ethical standards, they talk about adheres to the principles of transparency and best ethical practices as recommended by. They don't actually say they're a member. So that is a key kind of point that some experts have said. If they're not a member and they just simply say they adhere to the principles, that is a warning sign. There's a website that was developed anonymously based on Beale's list, which I mentioned was the original list of predatory journals and publishers, which was discontinued in January 2017. Jeffrey Beale, the founder of that, was receiving some harassment, and so he decided not to continue with the list. However, some individuals, some scholars came together to publish basically that data anonymously to protect themselves from potential harassment. So I can't verify anything about, I'm not necessarily advocating for this site because it's anonymously published, but I believe that you can use it as one tool to help you. They do provide a list of possible predatory journals and possible predatory publishers, as well as illegitimate metrics. And one of the things I should point out is that most journals, if you go and look under the list of journals and you don't see the journal there, remember that the list of journals will only contain those single journal publishers. So if a publisher has many journals, you won't find the journal name under the list of journals. You'll only find the publisher's name under the list of publishers. So you want to be sure to check both. Then there's another new tool which I would recommend that will be very helpful, that was created by several different organizations, and it's called Think, Check, and Submit. And you can go to this website and it'll help you walk through the process of where do I want to submit my journal to, and how can I be sure that I'm identifying a trusted journal or publisher for my research. So this is another tool I wanted to mention that will be helpful to you as a scholar to be sure that you're finding reputable journals for your work. Another thing that major publishers are starting to do is offer a journal finder or a journal sort of search engine, which will help you identify suitable journals from that publisher. So you can, these are hyperlinked, so when you have this PowerPoint, you can click on this, but basically, and this is where you'll type in, you'll put in the title of your paper and the abstract and maybe keywords, and it will generate a list of potential journals that would be suitable for that paper. Okay, so you know that that list of journals would be trusted journals coming from that publishing company. The one thing is they might give you a long list of journals that would be appropriate. So you have to go through and make sure that that journal is suitable, is the good fit for your paper. So for every paper you have, you need to be sure that the journal is a good fit. That means look at the aims and scope. You know, in many cases, some journals want you to have very quantitative data. You need to have a very heavily quantitative study. And in that case, you don't want to submit something that's not heavily quantitative to that journal because it will likely not get past the editor. You don't want to waste your time. So go through the aims and the scope. Go through the guidelines for authors. Look at other published articles in that journal. You know, assess, what kinds of articles do they publish? Look at the peer review process. So you have a really good sense of that journal. Make sure that journal would be a good fit for your paper. In some cases, you can send the title and abstract through email to the journal editor. If you think, hey, this journal looks like a good fit, but I'm not totally sure. So you can send the title and abstract to the editor and say, dear editor-in-chief, I would want to, I'd like to ask if you think this paper below would be a good fit for your journal. And they will usually send back a very helpful email to let you know whether they think, yeah, go ahead and submit, this looks good, or, no, it's probably not appropriate. So you won't waste your time formatting and doing all the work to submit to that particular journal. So that's one thing. And just in summary, I would suggest that you, instead of worrying so much about these disreputable journals, maintain a list of trusted journals in your field. Maintain a list. You know that these journals are valid, respectable, and and then you can be adding to that as new journals come online after you kind of review them. Look at where they're published from. Look at their societies that they're associated with, and then maintain that list. And that might be a better, easier way to deal with this problem of predatory publishing, by maintaining a list of reputable journals for your work. So in conclusion, I just want to say it's always good to make good choices, do good work, do good research. Please look at suitable journals with good peer review. And when you've got, questions, talk to mentors, talk to supervisors to get their feedback. Don't be naive. If it seems too good to be true, hey, we'll publish this in, 2 weeks, it probably is. You don't want to endanger your reputation by publishing in poor quality journals. As a scholar, it's really important to, protect your reputation. And we've talked about this in the last 2 presentations as part of this webinar series. Be careful with those unexpected invitations to publish or to join editorial boards or present at conferences. Just don't be naive, and hopefully this presentation will give you a good understanding of this predatory publisher problem and, how to avoid it, how to vet or to check journals. And again, I highly recommend keeping a list of trusted journals in your field. And that would be an easier way than constantly having to check journals every time you want to publish there. And let me just say at the end here, this picture is Dr. Peter Higgs, and he won the Nobel Prize in physics. He actually discovered the Higgs boson, which is a subatomic particle. And in 2013, a few years ago, he actually made a big announcement. He said, "Today, I would not get an academic job. It's as simple as that. I don't think I would be regarded as productive enough." He noted that right now, sometimes we focus a lot on quantity instead of quality. So your supervisors, they're publish as much as you can in these international journals. It's a pressure on us, as scholars. And so we may fall into the trap of using predatory journals just to kind of deal with that volume. But more and more people are recognizing the value of having a few really excellent papers of high quality versus having many sort of mediocre or poor papers. And so my PhD supervisor always recommended and it's talk that one given time to think, to dream, and discover. So I just like that. I thought I would end with that sort of note about quality over quantity. And you as scholars can also help with this issue by educating your peers and your colleagues and sharing this kind of information with them. So I want to thank everybody for your time. I greatly appreciate it. And I think we are ready to move to the Q&A. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Lynne, for the excellent presentation. We appreciate you so much. And I hope we all have our questions ready, and we'll be going then one after the other. And just in a quick one, we actually appreciate you once again. And Lynne has been able to tell us a number of things about predatory journal. And moving ahead, she was even able to tell us about how we can identify good and quality journal. So these are some of the things that we need as young researchers and upcoming researchers in communicating our research finding. We need to take a lot of caution. We need to be very careful so that we will not fall prey of predatory journal. But before we move ahead to the questions that we have over there, you have listed a number of side effects of predatory journal, maybe disadvantage of predatory journal. Before I read any question, can I quickly ask, is there any benefit of predatory journal? Do we even have any benefit from predatory journal?
That's an interesting question. I think probably some people would say, the idea that open access journals are available freely to everyone. So especially in cases of, maybe in developing countries where universities don't have access to many subscriptions. And so, you know, the idea is that you can't get access to articles, and so you're struggling. So having them freely available on the internet is a very positive thing. And I think that is, you know, one of the things is that predatory journals, you know, do make their open access. But at the same time, you know, I don't think there's a benefit in making poor science, you know, because then it actually has a negative effect. So not only is that poor science, it's available, sure, freely available, but it's also promoting maybe junk science, and that would be, you know, that would negate the benefit of it being freely available. And I know that some trusted journals that are open access do offer discounts for, you know, scholars from developing countries, sometimes waivers of the APC charges because they're so high. So I think it's worth reviewing those guidelines of every journal to see if that might be an option. But so I guess the only thing I would say is it's a little bit about open access, Dr. Folo, but again, the idea of publishing potentially some of the work that's being you know, that's being disseminated as poor or junk science, that would maybe negate the benefit of it being open access. Maybe that would be one.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the
one way to answer that.
Yeah,
I don't know if
it's very excellent. That's nice. Do I still have Tuyeni in the house and Professor Schwartz? Mark?
Yeah, I could add just briefly to that comment. Thanks, Lynn. That was a great presentation. The Society for Conservation Biology journals are published by Wiley. Wiley has on their website a list of countries that they structurally give discounts to authors of papers from. There are 100% discounts for the economically least developed countries, and there are several African countries that are in that. And 50% discounts for a few other countries. Nigeria is on the 50% discount list.
Oh, that is good. That's excellent. Anything from Tuyeni? Okay.
Her connection wasn't good today, so she may.
Okay. All right. So let me move to this very burning question from Providence. Providence sent this question. She says, "What are the measures in place to reduce or control predatory publishing? Does it mean that when an author cites such a paper in a non-predatory journal, it is rejected? Does it mean that if I have an article and I cited predatory journal in my article and I submitted that article for a journal, does it mean my paper is going to be rejected before I cite predatory journals?"
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that it doesn't mean that from the outset that your article would be rejected. Like I mentioned, some journals, like the Journal of Threatened Taxa, has a policy for accepting papers that cite other work from predatory journals. I think it's challenging because there can be good research that is published in a predatory journal, but you know, publishers are going to be wary of if you have one or two, and maybe that's the only study you could find, and you need to cite that, and it happens to be a predatory journal, but it's the only thing you could find that that applies in your paper. That's one thing. But if you have, say, 10, 20, predatory journals cited in your paper, it might be a problem for that publisher. So I think you have to, it doesn't mean from the outset that it would be rejected. I don't think so. But I think you should be cautious of using citations from predatory journals in case those publishers are checking and they're wary of that. And the more you use, obviously, the more risk you have of being maybe rejected from that.
Is there any comment from Mark Tuyeni? Citing predatory journal?
Yeah, I will add into that. So journals behave differently in terms of what they do. It's called desk rejection. And Conservation Biology and Conservation Letters are both journals that have fairly high desk rejection rates, which means they get that a paper could be rejected very quickly. But that desk rejection is primarily on criteria of academic nature. So they're looking for breadth and generality in studies. And if the editor doesn't feel that the paper is measured up to those criteria, then they could desk reject the paper. But there's also, through those journals, a bit of formatting and checking that goes on. And it's possible, but I don't know that they look for it at the citations to look at what predatory journals might have been cited in the article. Conservation Science and Practice, we have no structural way to do that. Again, there's a formatting issue, but we don't do a lot of desk rejection because our journal is based on a different model, not one of generality, but of utility for conservation. And so, yeah, I think that Lynn is right, that I think it would be very unusual for a reputable journal to a priori reject a paper based on the journal, on the citation, on the literature cited. That would probably be something that through the process of review, you'd be asked to revise.
Yeah. Oh, Fola, you're muted.
Oh, sorry for that. Thank you so much. Once again, thank you, Mike, for the response. And I want to appreciate Tuyeni for answering some of the questions. We've been answering some questions at the background. And for the benefit of those of us that are participating, you can read some of the content. Like somebody asking a question on how to publish paper, and we've been able to explain that to know how to publish scientific article is about reading other scientific articles. So we have said it in the first presentation that we have to read, read, read. And from reading, you are going to know how to write. Now, let me go to this very, very interesting question. And the question says that if somebody have published his article in conference proceeding, I mean full-length conference proceeding, can you go ahead to publish the paper in journal after the conference is over?
My understanding is that that is normally not accepted. I think it depends on if you publish the entire paper in a conference proceeding, and I think it may depend on the availability of those proceedings. I know if you just publish an abstract and you give a presentation at a conference, that does not prevent you from publishing the results of that study in a journal. So I think it might be a little bit context dependent on the nature of those proceedings and how available they are, and whether some proceedings are actually published, you know, as like a journal format. So I think it just depends a little bit. But I know if you give a presentation and you have an abstract published in a, you know, in the conference, you know, outline, and then you could definitely publish the results of that in a journal for sure. That would not be prevented, no. And Mark may have some thoughts on that too.
Yeah, and I think that's the right answer, that it is context dependent. I think probably if you want to make it as objective as possible, one would say if the conference proceedings has a document number, a DOI number, then it is a searchable document and then it's published. There are potentially conference proceedings where people are doing it and not publishing it with the document number as a consequence. That's really in the gray literature, and then you could publish a paper, submit a paper to a journal based on that.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. And there are some responses we have received based on that question. I think Omolara Oluwaniyi was able to respond by saying, I think it was asking about publishing in a conference proceeding and not book of abstract. So she now added that to avoid ethical issues, though it may be advisable to present the working at a conference without necessarily publishing in the book of proceedings, and then use the feedback from the presentation to improve the quality of the manuscript, and then publish in a standard journal. So it is possible for you to present your paper at a conference without accepting to publish the entire manuscript. Because what we do in Nigerian chapter of Society for Conservation Biology, our proceedings is just like a journal. We publish full article, and we make sure that we upload the article on a conference website. Such an article could not be published again in a journal because it will be considered as a plagiarized work, because you have already published it and people can Google and they can see your article online. So we advise that if you want your article to go for a journal, you may not be able to publish such in proceeding. If you publish in proceeding and it's uploaded online, it will be considered as a plagiarized work. So we have to have an option of either you publish in the proceeding or you publish it in a journal. The two is like somebody wants the same data to be published twice, which we consider as plagiarism. Is there any comment from Tuyeni? I don't think Tuyeni has a very good network today with us. Now, let me go to this question. Some of the newly established journals publish papers without really peer review. Possibly the team is still growing and there are no qualified reviewers yet. How does it normally work for such a journal, a young journal that is non-predatory, to have high quality papers? Do we get the question?
I think so. They're asking about peer review, that they don't have. It's a new journal that's not predatory, but they don't have many good reviewers. Is that what I'm hearing?
The question is a new journal that are just coming up. Is it possible for them to have good review process?
Yes, I mean, and they should. They want to establish a reputation for being rigorous. And so the review process is very important. And I don't know, you know, in terms of number of, some journals require, you know, like a minimum of 2 reviewers in you know, most trusted journals is a minimum, but usually it's 3 reviewers. And most journals will ask you when you submit your paper to recommend up to 3 different possible reviewers who would be suitable. And some actually say, okay, but we don't want you just to recommend your friends who aren't going to do a serious peer review. So they'll ask you, hey, you shouldn't have, this should not be somebody from your same institution, or it should not be somebody that you have collaborated with recently, that you should really recommend people that are that have knowledge about the type of research that you did for the paper, and that are going to give it a fair review. And the journal editors don't have to, and they often do not, you know, always use those recommended reviewers. They may choose others to do that. So I think a new journal that's coming up just needs to really establish a very rigorous peer review process. And it, you know, would be helpful for them to look at the peer review processes for other reputable journals. And they can go to the Society for Conservation Biology, look at Conservation Science and Practice, the guidelines for peer review, look at, you know, conservation biology, look at conservation letters, look at biological conservation and other journals in the field, and just, you know, come up with a good peer review process that they feel will help ensure that all articles are properly vetted and reviewed. Now, that would be my suggestion to editors that are starting a new journal, and Professor Mark may be able to add to that as well.
Yeah, that was a good synopsis and summary of what you should do as an author when submitting recommended reviewers for your paper. But as an editor of a new journal, I can speak directly to this issue of difficulties or challenges in getting peer review as a new journal. Well, and I should point out that conservation biology or conservation science is a growing field, that our journal through the society is a new journal, but the British Ecological Society has a new conservation journal that's coming in online in 2020. And Frontiers is also having a new conservation journal that will probably come on in 2021. So the list of journals that are reputable in this field is growing. As a new journal, because we work with Wiley, a big publishing company, we actually have access to the Wiley database of potential reviewers for papers. So it's the same database that Conservation Letters and Conservation Biology uses. And so we have a searchable index of reviewers available to us that's very large at the outset. And that's one of the advantages of big publishing companies. So we have people who can review, but once we invite them, will they actually accept the offer? And again, that's where being a society journal and working with a reputable publisher is to our advantage, is that people will say yes to reviewing for conservation science and practice because they recognize it's just a new journal, but it's from a reputable organization, and it will become a well-established journal. And that would be a different thing in a predatory journal, where you might get an invitation to review a paper from a journal you've never heard of. You're a lot less likely to agree to review that paper.
So
that's good.
Fola, can you?
Okay, Tuyani, go ahead, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Yeah, I just want to mention a few things related to this. So yeah, absolutely. What Lynne and then Professor Schwartz just
Oh, can you speak slowly? It's breaking, Tuyani.
I have nothing to add to that. What I wanted to sort of add as an aside is a couple going back to, okay, if it's breaking, then rather the chat and let you continue with the question and answers.
Okay, please, thank you. Now, quick one, in addition to what Mark just said, at least one of the issues we always have in this part of the world is Volume 1 journal. Volume 1 journal in most institutions, especially in university, is being rejected because you find it difficult to track the record of what have been published and what the standard is going to be like. And people just want to rush in getting the volume out so that be able to go to get the second volume out. I think if somebody wants to have a good journal that will command patronage in the future, Volume 1 need a lot of work, and new journals need a lot of work in order to sustain themselves. So if we as a young researcher or professional wants to publish, it may not be advisable at a Volume 1, but if you are desperately in need of a paper, of which if you come to university may not be acceptable. But well, we need to be careful with these new upcoming journals of who we don't know the standard. Then we need to know standards by their Volume 2, 3, and subsequent volume. Let me go to this question. The question says, how do one now treat or reference useful information gotten from predatory journal, since citing one may disqualify one from being published or may render your work low quality or something? Is it possible for you to see something good in predatory journal that I want to cite? How do you now cite that?
So that's a really good question. I have to say that, you know, when I look for local research in Nigeria on specific areas, often I find that what I'm looking for is not necessarily, you know, the journal is a little suspicious. So, you know, it's a struggle because the more that Nigerian scholars are using these predatory journals, it's difficult because that data is maybe important and it will be cited by others. But, you know, the question is, if it's appearing in a predatory journal, you ask yourself, do you want to cite this in my paper? Maybe it's the only thing you can find about water quality in a certain area of Nigeria, and so you're kind of stuck. So you have to maybe really carefully look at the paper, look at the methods, and make sure that, in fact, it is something worth citing. So as a scholar, I think if you're going to have to cite a predatory journal, it doesn't mean you're going to be immediately disqualified from publishing that your paper elsewhere. I don't think that's true, but I think you just need to be very cautious. If you know it's a predatory journal, look at the information in that paper, look at the methods, look at the results, and decide for yourself, is this really good quality work, even though it was published in a predatory journal? You know, is it something that I want to cite? Am I comfortable citing this? That might be a good way of thinking of it, instead of, you know, or looking for, you know, other studies that are in trusted journals instead of using that one. I mean, I think it's just important as a scholar for you to decide what you really need for your own research and your own paper, and whether you really have to cite that paper from a predatory journal. But before you decide to do that, you know, check the paper yourself in terms of whether you think it even was peer reviewed, you know, whether if there's lots of misspellings or grammatical mistakes, you know, maybe this paper was netted properly. So you would want to be cautious in then citing that. But I think you can probably find some cases, you can make a case for citing a predatory journal from time to time when you have assessed that paper and decided that it's really the only thing that you could find, and it looks like it was a properly conducted study. But I'd be careful. I just would be cautious.
Oh, that is nice. Thank you. Let me quickly go to this question so that we will save time and then we will be able to round up on time. The question says, could you please explain the non-obvious differences between publishing in an open access journal as opposed to a traditional non-open access journal, that is, in terms of pros and cons? Is there any difference between publishing in open access journal and the traditional non-open access journal that you have to pay before you can get the article?
Yes, and I think maybe Professor Mark will have some good thoughts on this too, but I'll just say that, you know, I think it really depends on the paper and the research, whether you, this is something that you really want to be available, freely available, and maybe it's the type of study that's very impactful and you want to make sure it's, you know, it's accessible to everyone. Of course, there is a fee difference. If you publish in a traditional journal, you will not be paying a fee. So that may be that may be the reason alone you decide, well, I don't have money to pay to publish this, so I'm going to have to go with a traditional journal. You know, it just means that most of the time people may not be able to access that freely. They'll have to have a subscription to that journal, or, you know, so that could be a deciding factor. But in terms of the quality, you know, peer review, respected journals, regardless if they're open access or traditional or not open access, they have, they should be, you know, follow good peer review and all of that. So I'm not really sure, other than sort of making the availability of the article and the financial aspect of it, that there are major differences. I think Professor Mark might have some ideas about that.
No, I think that's an excellent answer. I would say that at least for the society, there's an intentionality with conservation science and practice relative to conservation letters and conservation biology. Conservation biology is the traditional library, a subscription model versus the open access for conservation letters. But in the case of the society, that those two journals have been very explicit about striving to have a high impact factor. And so they're methodology. And the consequence of that is that they're going to be willing to publish more papers. But all these new journals are being launched as open access journals, because the library costs for subscription journals have gotten so high to libraries that they can't. Our library at our university, for example, is cutting out journals left and right. And Wiley is actually actively trying to move journals from a subscription model to an open access model. And so it's likely that in the next 10 years, you'll see more and more journals switching from a library a fee model to an open access model, because it's the business model for journals in the future. It just is. And of course, that makes this more confusing with respect to predatory journals. But otherwise, I would just think that a major distinction is that these older library subscription models just have a higher fraction of them that are really driven by trying to achieve the highest impact factor that they can, which means that an awful lot of them have very high rejection rates. I should point out just one last thing, that there are journals that run through societies that have a connection model. So papers that get submitted to conservation biology, for example, if the editor decides it doesn't have the breadth or generality required for that journal, that papers will be invited then to transfer to another journal within that society, like Conservation Science and Practice. And the consequence of that is it can save some time.
Oh, thank you so much for that comment and for the answer.
To this follow, I don't know if you can hear.
Okay, go ahead, please, Tuyani.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I wanted to add a few things to this conversation. One of them is that there is a lot of other things that one has to consider when they're deciding about open access or traditional, and it has to do with, and you sort of mention it, your budget. Now, how much do you have allocated, and how much can you afford? Open access is not cheap at all. And I think it very much depends where you are in your career as well. That there is a point in your career where you're working on volume, where you're saying, okay, I need to at least get, those 20 papers, those first 50 papers, whatever it is. And it becomes really expensive for each one of those papers to cost you $2,000, $1,800, $1,500, even more. And while you're working towards that volume, it might be that open access is not your priority, because there's also an ethical consideration, not so much ethical, but a principle consideration when you think of open access. Open access is about who can access your research and trying to make sure it's as available to as many people as possible. But I know I have that struggle when I look at my operational budget, and I know that I have 3 students who are trying to publish this year, and those 3 papers in an ordinary a traditional publication use up all my operational budget. There is no way we can consider open access. It's just out of our financial reach. So, but it's important that they publish. So it's a really priority setting, and I think it becomes a consideration when you're higher up on the career level to think about open access or traditional, but otherwise your choice stays with traditional. I'd love to hear any other.
Oh, thank you so much, Uyeni. That is a very good answer, and thank you, Prof. and Lynne, is a very good response. We just need to look at the condition of these two, go for the one that fit your budget. From what I can hear now, your budget, look at your budget, and then you look at your time frame. They are very important in order for you to publish there. Now, let me quickly say this. In this part of the world, in Nigeria, even with an academic, they gave us the 3 types of journal we use for our promotion. We have the home-based journals. Those are the journals that are residing in your universities. We have a national journals that are within the country, but not based in your university. And then we have the international-based journals. And all these journals were allocated scores for you to get your promotion. Now, I want to sound a note of warning for those of us, the young one coming up in academics, that now the academics are looking for either it is home-based, national or international. The journal must have a website and domicile online with online feasibility. So a number of our society journals are not yet online. So you may miss out from your promotion exercise if eventually you submit such papers published in non-journal without a website or online feasibility. We need to quick know that. And then journals need to have the DOI. You need to have the DOI number. The journals, I know most of our journals don't have impact factor, especially the local one, but they must have what we know as indexing. It must be indexed in good online based indexing system. So these are some of the things I said I wanted to quickly say, but somebody has a question as we are rounding up. The question says that now, as a young professional, upcoming academics, I now fall prey of publishing my paper in a predatory journal. What do you want to tell me? What do you want to advise me? Is that the end of the world? Have I lost everything? I publish in an predatory, I don't know, but I publish in a predatory journal. What can you please tell me?
No, it is not the end of the world by any means. You know, I think this whole phenomenon is relatively recent, and more and more, as we become more and more aware about how predatory publishers operate and how easy it is to be deceived, and I'm young and I'm not very experienced, no one is necessarily going to fault you for that happening. And I think once you recognize that, you can simply, you know, turn things around in terms of identifying those reputable journals in future. It's not the end of the world. And if your supervisor asks you about it, or somebody asks you about it in terms of promotion, you can say, you know, at the time I wasn't aware, and you know, haven't used those journals since I became aware. I mean, I don't think it's the end of the world at all. I think it's a good learning experience, and you can share that experience with others to help them also learn about this issue.
Anything from Mark?
I don't have anything to add to that. I think that was a good answer.
So, well,
yeah, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so just be aware that it can happen to anybody and everybody. So there are also some journals that, for instance, are on Beall's list, but that list has not been updated, I think, since 2017. And as an example, for instance, I did a whole special issue where I had 10 authors or 10 papers in a journal that I found out halfway through, after everybody's papers were in review, that apparently it was on Beall's list. Did I stop the review? Did I stop the special issue? I didn't.
That is interesting.
We continued with the special issue because there was also, we went back to look at the list and all the discussions that went up. It was one of the Frontiers journal, and Frontiers happens to be a contentious journal or publishing house, so to speak, where some of their journals are considered predatory and some not. So it's not a perfectly black and white list. There's lots of gray, and when it came to promotion time, I had to eliminate that special issue from, it couldn't be considered. But the work is being read. It's got this, I mean, so I achieved the work is out there. I know the science was good because I was working with very good authors and scientists. But the fact that it's in this space means that it can't be used for people's promotions. So it's
that's really good. That's a really interesting, Tuani. Thank you for sharing that. And I should also mention, yes, there was a lot of controversy over some of the Frontiers journals at one point, and that Beall's list, you know, it's meant to be sort of probable or suspected predatory publishers and journals, and Beall's list was discontinued, but that predatoryjournals.com site it was sort of took over the list, and I believe they're updating it, but anonymously, to avoid the problems that Jeffrey Beal had. But I just want to mention, Professor Tueni just said that, you know, she was organizing this special issue. And we know that as, you know, as a scholar, that she will, and her reviewers and her authors for that special issue would have been subject to, you know, rigorous peer review and vetting. And so even though that might have come out into a, you know, been published in what Beal's list said was a predatory journal, those people involved would have helped ensure that, you know, it would have met the requirements of a very respectable journal. So I think that's one key difference in that work relative to the typical problems with predatory publishers.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think we have exhausted our time, and because I have another Zoom immediately after this, and I want to specially appreciate Lynne, Dr. Lynne Baker, for this excellent presentation. Thank you so much. We're giving you our clap. Thank you for the presentation. We love your presentation. Thank you so much. Prof. Mark Schwartz, I always like to see you around, and I love seeing you today again. Thank you so much for always being there, for being in the midst of small boys like us, and upcoming professional like us. Thank you, Prof. I appreciate you. Take our clap. Thank you so much. Tueni, I don't know what to say about you. I don't know what to say about you. Thank you so much, Tueni. We love everything you have done for us, for hosting us, for always being there at the background, the logistics. Thank you so much. I give you a very big clap too. Thank you to this team. I know this team, we're still coming back. I will look at the logistics and how it's going to work, because somebody has a question I skipped. The question says, how can we take this thing further? How can we make it practical? How can we get it to the point of mentoring people to get their paper published? I know we will get there. So let us keep thinking. Let's look at the logistics possible to be able to organize a practical session where paper could be reviewed and people can get published through this platform. I've told people, please kindly drop your name and your email before you log out. And one thing that we have just decided, that this webinar, because it's 3 weeks, consecutive weeks, non-stop, from the popular demand, we are ready to issue certificate of participation for as many that are interested. It's not compulsory, but if you have interest in the certificate, and people have been requesting from me, you can have it. I've already sent information out, and it's just a matter of paying token to get the certificate. So if you're interested, get across to us. So once again, I appreciate you all for joining us this week. I appreciate you for taking put. For those of you that were there with us since series 1, 2, and 3, thank you so much. We'll continue to be together in this chapter of Nigerian chapter of Society for Conservation Biology, the most active chapter in Africa. We are very, very happy for everything we have been doing and what we will still continue to do. So please join SCB, join Global SCB, join Nigerian chapter, and do something for the biological diversity. Let us conserve our biodiversity. Let's protect our biodiversity. Let's build a career and move it forward. And we appreciate everybody for joining us. Last word, do you want to say bye to our people? We'll see them again. I'm going to send the recording to everybody, and I'm going to send the PowerPoint to everybody, and then we'll pick it up from there. Any word to any?
Oh, just thank you very much. It's been great being part of this. It's wonderful to see all the comments, and yes, thanks for sticking around for all 3 weeks.
Okay.
Thanks, Paula. I think you need to give you a big round of applause as well.
Lynne, any word? Our professor in the making, Lynne?
No, I just want to thank my people there in Nigeria for joining us, and it's been great. And we hope, maybe follow these kinds of discussions on these pressing issues can be brought up at the next conference, the Nigerian chapter conference, maybe there can be a session or something devoted to further discussion to keep these topics in the forefront of what's going on, maybe. So thank you so much to everybody.
Oh, thank you so much. I think we're going to do something about that. We're going to keep talking because, as they normally say in Nigeria, it's either you publish or you perish. We don't want to perish, we want to publish. So publication is not an option, it's something we must do. So thank you so much once again. We'll see you later. And I say, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye, Fola. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, Lynn. Bye, Mark.
Bye, Mark. Bye, Tierney. And bye, Lynne.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.